Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. This is your host, Roy. So, we are a podcast that brings a wide variety of guests that speak on a diverse topics to, help our listeners maybe identify some opportunities for themselves, or if there are some deficiencies, it also gives us experts to reach out to try to help us be more successful, be more profitable as we go through our business. So today we are lucky to have Phil Preston, and Phil traded in his high flying corporate career to help businesses use purpose to make a difference and grow their bottom line. He's a speaker, facilitator, and strategist, and the author of the book Connecting Profit with Purpose. He works with small, medium enterprises through all the way to the multinational corporations and everything in between, as well as helping public and social sector organizations work more collaboratively with the private sector. Outside of his work, he's over invested in coffee, chocolate, and trail running. So, Phil, glad to have you. I'm a little tongue-tied this afternoon, but
Yeah.
glad to have you with us. Thanks for staying. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to be with us.
Yeah, no, it's great to be with you, Roy. Thanks very much. And I've already had my run today, so I'm feeling pretty
Have
good.
you? Okay. Yeah, I was kind of getting on the digging the coffee and the chocolate, and then we got to trail running. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know about that one.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so yeah, it's an interesting concept that we hear a lot about more, and that was one reason. When we connected, that was why I had invited you on the show. I want to just learn more about tying in purpose with business, and making a business more successful, helping our bottom line, and then also I think it's the how can we use purpose in our business to maybe even step over into that public and social sector, which are all needing so much help nowadays. It's a very timely subject.
Mm. Yeah, look, and I think particularly for small to medium-sized business owners like you and I and many others, it's often tempting to think of purpose as the thing we do outside of our work. And, we don't have a lot of life outside of our work sometimes. We're pretty flat out. So it's a real
Right.
bonus if you can build purpose into your work as well. And I guess this was some of the revelations that came to me after I left my corporate lifestyle, that there's many different ways of approaching purpose. And as long, the first step is to be aware of, for example, the three different types and three different ways you can do that, because then you can make conscious choices about how you pursue it and don't end up. I think a lot of people want to make so much difference in the world. They run around doing lots of things, and that adds to the burnout in their life.
Right.
So you don't want to have that situation. But if you can build on things, that's far better.
Right. Exactly. And the other thing about that is if you do something you like, and there are many days that go by, I get tapped on the shoulder and say, your work day is through. It's time to get up and do something else. And that's just I guess that's a byproduct of actually doing something you love that you feel has a purpose. And I think it makes your work life much easier, because I don't ever feel like I work a day in my life, because I feel like there is that purpose. I think it's a very important factor that I guess a lot of times we fall into businesses or end up somewhere, but like you said, if we don't feel that purpose, it can lead to burnout in a hurry and mess up a lot of other things in our life.
That's right. Yeah. So there's, we do philanthropic things where there are causes we want to give to, whether it's personally outside of our business or within our business. That's all good. There's, things we do to be responsible as a business, like we might, I don't know, the paper we put in our photocopiers might be from some, a pulp or forestry source that's been accredited. So we're doing the right thing there. But there is a third level. Once we go beyond the philanthropic and then the responsible things to do, there's a third level which is really exciting. And that's the area I like to get into, where things actually line up with your business in a way that help you grow your bottom line, but also make a really big difference in the world. And that's something that's not always easy, but if we can get there, look, it just it makes our lives almost perfect, I reckon. You can't get perfect,
Right.
but close to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So, how did you come out of the corporate world and get involved in specializing in, trying to, I guess, match businesses with a purpose or find their purpose? I guess it's a combination of the business that they're in and the owner, what they are interested in. I guess there's a lot of variables that go with that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I when I grew up, I had a pretty, I'd say, linear or simple view of the world. I thought,
Yeah,
you get a job, a career, you work in a business or for a business, and you give back what you can when you can. And
right, right.
that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, you can do that. However, taking a cue from a lady called Judith Rodin, who was the head of the Rockefeller Foundation in the US for some time. She made the point that even with rising levels of philanthropy, there's not enough resources there to really make a difference. So you go, okay, well, philanthropy does play a role, but if it's not going to make a big difference and solve our challenges, what do we do next? And the next port of call was me. In my role, I was working in the investment industry, and we were looking at companies being responsible. So they're doing the right thing by the customers or by people they're buying goods from. They're doing the right thing by their staff. But really, those activities, even though they're good and companies need to do them, I realized that they don't change the world either. They're really just about companies protecting their brand and reputation.
Right.
And I don't think you and I are going to run around going, yes, we're going to change the world by protecting brand and reputation. So when I left my corporate career, I sort of got to a point where I'd been working in the investment industry for 17 years, and I just stuck my head up above the parapet, and I realized I didn't want to do this for the rest of my life. So like a jet fighter pilot who hits the ejector seat button when he's in trouble, I left and started researching the different ways companies make a difference. And what I found was, on top of the two approaches I already knew about, I found this third one that just one or two companies were able to do really well. And instead of making a difference sort of at this level, they were making a difference that was way up here. And It took me a while to figure out what the formula was. But when I figured it out, it was like, oh, this was, I'd found my life's calling, because those companies were the ones that could make a difference in a profitable way. And
Right.
if they could do that, it meant they kept doing it and kept investing in it. And I can give you some examples as we go along, but
Please.
that's the key to it, is connecting profit with purpose. So a really nice, a couple of quick examples, and this is one in my book. I covered this as a case study. Some real estate agents in an area not far from where I live in Sydney, Australia, were helping to reduce tenancy evictions, because there are some tenants who just don't want to pay the rent. they can, but they won't. We're not trying to protect them. But there's a range of tenants, and in COVID, we know people have health problems, mental health problems. People lose their job, and you don't want those unnecessary evictions if you can help it. So instead of the real estate agents just going through the process of evicting people when they couldn't pay their rent, they actually changed their own internal process, and they didn't have to do a lot. It was only a little thing they had to do. By making referrals of those people to the right support agencies, what they found was they could save more than 50% of those tenancies. And so there was a really, really big social impact here, but at the same time, they realized they were saving themselves money by avoiding that eviction process. So yeah, that's when we get those really nice win-wins. And so they have an incentive to keep doing it, and they also have an incentive to make a difference on a bigger scale than they might through some of their other means.
Yeah, and that's again, that's a timely message, because I assume instead of going through all of that cost for eviction, and then sometimes even though we have all the legal rights, it can still take a long time. This is a way that they can at least recoup a bigger portion of their money, and also keep the tenant, and probably not force them to lose their livelihood as well.
Well, that's a really good point, because one of the things we did in this study was actually put numbers around those effects. So for the real estate agency themselves, there was $1,000 in hard costs that they were saving. And that's before, extra stress and extra time they had to spend going through those eviction processes. But when they added it up, their landlords were saving on average about $10,000 because, it's a sizable amount because, as you alluded to there, eviction processes can take a long time. So,
right.
the landlord's potentially losing rent for months at a time. They then have to do up the property. There might be some damage and things that need replacing, and then they have to pay reletting costs. So when you start making, when you start putting numbers around it, it becomes a business case, not something that's nice to do.
Exactly. So there is that financial impact, and there is this. That's a great example because it's a win-win. I guess the financial impact for the real estate company, but then there was also that social aspect of being able to, help the tenants or point them in the right direction. So, again, unfortunately, in that position, sometimes people don't know where to reach out or how to get that help. So, a company that having those resources, that's awesome. So what are some other if you can speak to them, what are some other examples of a type of an industry where they've been able to use purpose?
Yeah, sure. Another one I recently stumbled across, which I love, is a lawyer who was turning away people from her practice. Now, she was practicing in family law and a lot of divorce cases. And apparently the average cost, so this is in Australia, I don't know what it is in the US, but the average cost of legal services for a divorce that's not really fractious, but maybe doesn't run completely smoothly, is around $100,000. So both parties are going to end up $100,000 worth off. And if there's kids involved, that's the kids sort of losing the value of that money as well.
Exactly.
So, she found she was turning away 6 out of 10 clients because they couldn't afford her or the industry's services. And what she ended up doing was creating an online product, and she invested a lot of money in it. So for people who look like they're going to have a fairly straightforward process, they can use the online product. There's a lot to do, but at the end of it, they end up with an agreement that's legally enforceable and both parties can sign. And it costs less than $1,000 to use this online service. So again, she's helping to address a social problem, which is around the affordability of legal services. And look, it won't suit everyone, but for a large portion of people, it does suit. They'll be saving a lot of money out of their estate, which is good for them and good for their kids.
So, that is unbelievable.
I love that.
No, that's a great example of just thinking outside the box and figuring out a way to, not only to generate a little revenue for herself, but also solve a client problem for her, people that she was having to turn away. So that's definitely a win-win.
That's right. And it's scalable because it's online. So within Australia, because law is different from country to country, but that is scalable. So she can end up, this can be a profit generator for her as it grows. So again, it's not a philanthropic donation. And maybe a final example, just to change tune a little bit. And I love this one because I did this case study for a pig farm. And a pig farm, one of the biggest costs in a pig farm was for this farmer was the cost of grain that they were feeding to their pigs. And at the time, grain costs were going up in Australia, and that this was a challenge for them. So what they ended up doing was partnering with a range of food manufacturers that at the end of a food run, they'd always have leftover food. So it was costing those food manufacturers about $300 a ton to take that green waste and dump it in a tip. So what they found was that for about $75 a ton, so far cheaper rate, they could transport it to this pig farm, and the pigs would get the food, and so the farmer was happy because they had free feed. The food manufacturer was happy because it cost them far less, and I think the pigs were pretty happy because they were getting things like leftover ice cream and a range of
exactly
pasta, ice cream, orange juice. So it was a win-win all around.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I had both had different sets of sides of my family that were in the propane business, and to be honest, that's how they got into it. Back in the, I guess this was back in the late 30s, early 40s, it was a waste product, and
Hmm.
the refineries just couldn't get rid of it. So these guys figured out a way to go pick it up, haul it off, and turn it into a very usable and profitable business. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's about just kind of keeping our eyes open and not getting stuck in that same rut. Look around at these different things that we can do to, not only help others, but help ourselves in the end too.
Yeah, and I love that example because you've given an example there of someone creating a new market or a new product that's needed
Right.
in a way
Exactly.
that's saving a byproduct that might be wasted. So that's a new product and market opportunity. And so there's those opportunities, and there's the ones which are around, I guess, being more productive or cutting costs. Which
Yeah.
in the case of the pig farm, that was really about cutting costs. So there's many
Yeah.
different ways you can find these types of opportunities. Although I have to say, every business is slightly different. So
Right.
there's no guaranteed formula you can put on a plate and say this is
Yeah.
how you do it. But there's a
Yeah.
process you can go through that will find those opportunities for you.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. So, Monday morning, you get Phil gets a call from Roy saying, "Hey, I'd really like to find a way to, tie my business in with purpose." So I know everybody's going to be a little different, but kind of say, what are the general steps that you would go through with your clients?
Yeah, so there's two angles here really. One is about as you mentioned, how do we embed purpose in our business as to hard code it in our DNA? And then there's the secondary part, which is finding the initiatives or strategies like the ones we just spoke to. So let me go through the first one. So to actually
Okay.
become a very purposeful business, look, there's a key transformation that has to take place if it hasn't already taken place. And I call this the transformation from activities to outcomes. So yeah, activities to outcomes means you're not thinking about your business as, say, making cars, which is an activity. You're thinking about your business as, say, sustainable transport solutions, which is more
Right.
about an outcome. So you're
Right.
thinking about how is my business benefiting society more so than what activity do I do to make money? Now,
Yeah.
of
Right.
course, you still got to make money, but what I found is if you get that purpose piece right, if you really and truly understand what the benefit is you're providing to society, the bottom line often takes care of itself because you tend to find uh, really good new ideas and new ways of adding value to your customers that you might not have thought of before. So yeah, the process is really to get that mindset piece right. Now, if we're dealing with a very small business with one, a couple of employees, that's not much of a challenge. They're either they get it or they don't. But when you start dealing
Yeah.
with bigger businesses and you've got line managers and people running parts of a plant, for example, then sometimes it's an exercise to work with the people in the business to ensure everyone's on that same level. Then the next thing to focus on is really, well, what is our purpose? We want to come up with a purpose statement and one that we truly believe in and want to deliver on, not something we just want to write on a bit of paper and wave around in the wind once a year. So that's the second thing, and so there's a little bit of an art to creating a purpose statement, and the third part then is to say, well, a statement's not enough. You've actually then got to help everyone in the business understand what it means for them. What are you giving
Right.
them license to do, or maybe license not to do, and how is it going to help you? So that's the, I guess, embedding purpose in a business. And to answer the second part, to come up with specific ideas and strategies, it's really about, look, I'll put it in very simple terms. It's if you wrote down, even for you, just wrote down what are the 10 biggest challenges I'm facing today in my business, and then you created a second list to say, well, what are the challenges I'm seeing around me in my community or my industry? You take those two lists and you, with a bit of working through it, you'd see that, okay, maybe this one marries up with that one over here. I can see a connection between one or two. You're not going to use all of them. You're not going to solve all of them, but you will start to see a
Right. Right.
pattern and some opportunities will emerge.
Yeah.
And now I work across a lot of industries, so it's sometimes you kind of sort of know where to look for in certain industries for these challenges, but sometimes they come out of unusual places. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and when we look at solving it that way, it's I guess it's a little bit more business related. But if somebody came to you and wanted more, to, I guess, veer a little bit out of their lane, what the business was, to try to solve help solve for social problems, somehow interweave those, does that become more complex, or have you found it's easy to kind of weave those fabrics together?
So the challenge is you can't necessarily take a social problem that you want to solve and say, I'm going to do that in a profitable way. Like, you might be able to find a way to do that, but it just may not work, because unless solving that problem is going to help reduce costs for your business or add to your bottom line, then it's, we're not in this space. It doesn't mean you can't help that problem through your philanthropic or volunteering agenda or something else.
Right.
But you sort of, it's a little bit confronting to say to someone, you can't go into this with preconceived ideas about what the solution is. We've got to find all the possible options on the table for you, and then we'll work through it and prioritize which ones look best and which ones you pursue. Yeah.
So how hard is it to, like for me, if we sat down and figured this out, it'd be pretty easy to implement. But as the company gets larger and larger, what are some of the implementation challenges that you have seen in order to have my vision or my ideals kind of filtered down? And I listening to you speak, I can only imagine that if we get our employees involved in this on the ground floor, the good ideas probably trickle up to the, not down, but trickle up.
Yeah, that's right. They need to go both ways. And I think the big change for a lot of businesses is that you're moving away from a decision. If we think about giving and philanthropy and volunteering, it's, who signs off the check and says we're going to give this much to a charity? That is normally, the owner or the CEO or the managing director of the business. There might be some input from staff, but it's viewed as something that's outside of our normal day-to-day activities. Right. So what we're talking about here is, when we're connecting profit with purpose, it's actually bringing it into the core of our business, which means, when I talked about, when you talked about the propane idea, or when I talked about the lady helping divorces and people through that process, it's going to impact everyone in the business. So it's not just about one person. It is about marketing. It's about sales. It's about operations. It's about human resources, or it could be around a whole range of things. So what you find is everyone is sort of involved in this, like they would be with any normal business case or any plan that followed from a business case. Right. So I think that's the key piece of advice. You will be introducing this in a business as usual way. So in some ways that makes it easier, because you just might be implementing something within your existing policies and procedures. It's just a slightly different thing you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's sometimes, as I'm just thinking of things as waste, if we think about a factory and we have a waste product, it's like sometimes we've been so used to throwing it away or paying to get it hauled off for years that maybe get involving the workforce to the point of having these conversations. Somebody could, have that good idea, like, hey, we could either, repurpose this waste, or at least, give it to somebody else that could use it to a profitable way, I guess, or reduce their costs, kind of like the pig farmer.
Yeah, there's a really good example too, again from the US, which now I think I've got the company name right here. I think it was Interface Carpets or Interface Tiles. Forgive me if I've got the name slightly wrong, but it was headed up by a guy called, again, I think it was Ray Anderson, who's now deceased, unfortunately. However, he kept driving this idea. Well, for starters, he realized that why do you lay carpet in a whole roll when someone spills something on part of it? You just want to be able to replace a small bit. So he initially drove this idea towards carpet tiles, so you could just replace tiles. But then he further had this idea that he could do that on a zero waste and zero emissions basis. And this was back in the 80s. Now, one of the secrets to his success, he eventually conquered that challenge. So on the one hand, he was able to drive his staff by setting this amazing challenge that they really were inspired by and wanted to help achieve. And on the other hand, he was able to commute, because this was a public company, he was able to communicate this in a way to the board and to the stock market that they understood this was a commercial imperative. And he was always connecting it with dollars and cents in the process. So he was really nicely able to speak to those two, I guess, groups of stakeholders in a way they understood and came along for the ride. And that's powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when we can solve problems for our for our consumer eventually, and drive some to the bottom line, that is definitely a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and so one of the benefits of that is that their company became so advanced in their industry that when others realized, well, that's the way of the future, it took them a long time to catch up. So that company ends up with a good period of sustained competitive advantage there.
Right. Yeah, and the good thing about, I think, reaching out and connecting with professionals like yourself in this field is that, like me, I wouldn't even have a clue where to start. But the good thing is, with a little bit of direction, I'm sure that, the ideas can start flying, and, eventually, like you said, you can kind of marry some opportunities on both sides of that equation together to make it, where it's a home run.
Yeah, I'll tell you where the real nice sweet spot is, because I do a lot of speaking engagements, and sometimes people will contract me to come in and run a bit of a whole of room workshop. And what I find is that it's the next session, and it only needs to be often 90 minutes or 2 hours, maybe at most. When people are buying into the idea, they're still a little bit unsure where they go next and how do I start unpacking this. But it often takes only about 90 minutes. And that's great in the virtual world we're in today, because we can easily do this. Just that 90 minutes can really, I guess, get them a long way down the path. And we all know about the 80-20 rule. So you can get 80% of the way there in a very short space of time. And that's the most exciting part of the process, I find. And then people can come out of that sort of session with the next steps and knowing what to do from there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that some have to press harder than others, but I was going to ask you about that success rate. So you think that 80-20 rule applies also to, people that would reach out to you and be able to come to you, that, probably on a good 75 to 80%, you'll be able to find that intersection where they can have purpose that add to the bottom line?
That's right. Well, the great thing is I sit outside their business, so I can't do it for them. It's really still up to them to execute and implement. So the other great thing is they know their business. I don't. So I'm a little bit like a purpose guide or purpose coach who can help them navigate their way through this. But at the end of the day, they've got to do the work. And but with that hand holding, it gives people the confidence that they know they're on the right track and they're not wasting time. And if it adds to their bottom line, they know it's a good investment and they're going to come out ahead out the other end. So, yeah, look, I love it, but I don't pretend. When I started consulting, I left the corporate world and thought I'll be a consultant. I thought as a consultant, you had to solve everyone's problem immediately. Right? But I soon figured, no, I can't do that. I'm really, you're there to guide people towards help them find their solutions and help them put it into practice.
Exactly. Excuse me. Yeah, exactly. Well, Bill, I certainly do appreciate you taking time out of your day to, come on and talk to us about the, connecting profit with purpose. And before I let you go, a couple of things. Number one is, so what is a tool that you use in your daily life that it could be in professional, your personal life, but something that you do could be a habit that adds a lot of value to your day?
Well, I'm going to fall back on my hobby here of trail running. So I'm not going professional, I'm going personal. And it's important because every day exercise, look, I do it at the crack of dawn, and I find it's just great, whether it's walking or running. You come back to the desk and you feel fantastic for the rest of the day. But there is an app that goes with that, and I use Strava, which is a way of just recording how far you've gone and how fast. And look, it just helps in giving you some benchmarking and understanding where you're at. And there's actually communities that build around that. So you end up connecting with other people, who are runners, and you can see what everyone's doing. And it actually creates a really nice community buzz around that hobby.
That's cool. Yeah, we talk about this quite a lot. This is even getting out, and for me taking a a 15-minute walk, it just clears my head so much. So yeah, getting that start of the day, getting the after you've exercised, there's nothing like it. It's a
Yeah,
big, to me it's a
especially
big
if you've got
productivity.
especially you'll I think resonate with this, especially if you've got a crazy dog that keeps you awake half the night because they sleep on your legs and things like
Right. Exactly.
that.
Yeah, we did have a discussion about that getting all
Yeah,
tangled. Yeah, it's kind of like this morning. That we're taping this on the weekend. I thought, oh, I'm gonna sleep in this morning, but one of these animals was about 5:30 this morning. They got really restless, so I've had a long day already. But
yeah,
we couldn't make it without them. That's for sure.
that's right.
So, also tell us a little bit about connecting profit with the purpose. Is that available on Amazon? And we'll be sure and put
That's
all
right.
this in the show notes as well. But
Yeah,
how can
sure.
somebody get a copy of that?
So that's the book there. You can probably see it behind me as well.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
it's available on all the major online retailers. So you can buy it as an ebook format or order a hard copy, and yeah, through Amazon and all the main players. So that's the best way to go about it. And what it does, apart from, I guess, makes the case for all this, the section 3 gives you a how-to, helps you step through the
Okay.
process that we talked about, and helps you on your journey. So I'm not just there to tell you this is a great idea and then leave you alone. I want to help people through the process as much as
Right.
possible, and then some want to go really hands-on and do something in person. That's great, but I think we don't talk about this enough. It's something that's a little bit hard to crack and sometimes hard for people to get their head around. So I'm a very
Right.
how-to person, and I like to help people get on their way.
Well, awesome. Well, pick up the book and read through it, get excited about it, and then give Phil a call. And so the other thing is, tell us, what does your client look like? What can you do to help them through this journey? And then again, how can they reach out and get a hold of you?
Yeah, so clients hire me for two main reasons. Well, maybe three, but two main. One is they're looking often for, I guess, small businesses that might have typically, 10 to 100 staff, um, or sometimes more, will be looking to actually really embed their purpose, understand what it is, and get all their people on board with the same thing, so they can then move forward and start discovering opportunities. There's a range of other businesses that will really just want to go straight into what's the strategy, what's the initiative, a new thing we can do, and we can tackle it that way. And there's actually a third type of business, and this was one that came along quite a bit last year for me, was the company that was doing a range of activities, but not really understanding they were having a huge positive social impact, but they actually didn't see it. They were doing so many things, but they saw their social impact as this little bit of giving they were doing over on the side. But actually, they were buying millions of dollars of produce from organic farmers, and so that there was more impact in that side of their business, and it was helping them understand, A, that was the case, but B, okay, well, how could you potentially support the community of growers you're dealing with there to help them do their job better, that'll help you get better qualities and yields of crops and so on. So that came very much from a social impact angle. And so finally, I also work with a lot of not-for-profits and charities, because instead of going around and just asking for money from companies, they can often zero in on what's going to really be of benefit for the company. So it becomes a true partnership conversation, not just a can we have some funding conversation, and that's quite empowering as well.
Yeah, and I imagine for them, one thing you mentioned earlier, I think that's important is, moving from that activity, thinking about the activities to thinking about outcomes.
Outcomes,
Really,
yeah.
That's a good idea for everybody to think about that.
Yeah.
All right, Phil. Well, thank you so much again for taking time out of your busy day. We certainly do appreciate it. And that's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. Of course, you can find us at, I'm sorry, before I get all crazy and off on that, did you give us your contact information, your website?
Oh, my website is philpreston.com.au. So you'll definitely find me
Okay.
there. Yep.
Okay. Good. And yeah, and I'll include that in the show notes as well. But just in case somebody wants to reach out and get a hold of you. So that's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. We do appreciate you listening. Of course, you can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and this will go up live on YouTube as well, the video. And we're on all the major podcast platforms. So be sure and share. If we're not on a platform that you use regularly, please reach out. I'd be glad to get us added. Until next time, take care of yourself and please take care of each other.